Hi there, I'm Belinda Bradford, and before I hit record on another episode of this podcast, and before you tune in to watch me sit across from another guest and ask that guest, what's the biggest risk they ever took? I wanted to take some time out from the usual format and my usual schedule and explain why this podcast exists at all. And I want to say this now because I think if I don't say it in my own words, on camera, by myself, it's going to get lost under all the guest names and launch graphics and the clips we cut for socials, especially as our audience grows. And I really wanted to give you the complete insight as why we're doing what we do every week. So here's what I believe, and this is the foundation of not only WEGroup Global, but the Full Tilt podcast. Human connection is the foundation of every successful business, every successful person, and every life well lived. It's not the strategy or the funding. It's not the 10-step framework that someone's tried to sell you up on a stage with a headset mic on. It's the connection, the real kind, the kind where someone actually sees you and you actually see them. And something gets built in that space between two people that no spreadsheet can account for. It's the kind of relationship we often read about, but often find it difficult to create. And it includes the ups and downs of being human, because all of that matters as well. Now, I didn't arrive at this as a theory. I actually arrived at it, like most things in life, the hard way. After building things from nothing, after being part of teams that worked really hard to develop ideas and then turn them into huge businesses, after standing in rooms on more continents now than I can count, and realizing that the businesses that actually worked, the ones that meant something, and the ones that I was really proud of, were never won on the numbers or the job titles or the CVs of the people in them alone. They were won because somewhere in the middle of it, people trusted each other, and they trusted each other enough to be honest with themselves and each member of their team. That's the difference, in my view, between average and great and success and failure. Now, at this stage of my career, I've worked in global leadership roles and I've built businesses across 4 continents. I've sat in boardrooms where everyone was fluent in the language of growth, and yep, everyone's been in front of a great business presentation where everyone's paying attention and looking at the numbers. But in the same room, no one was really saying anything that was true. And sure, I've had wins that look good on a PowerPoint slide, and I've been part of really successful exits. I've been part of businesses that have achieved extraordinary business valuations and, been part of the headlines that go along with that. And I can tell you that none of them on their own ever really felt enough. Some of them, if you knew the board members or the management team dynamics behind the scenes, they actually felt pretty empty. And in some cases, the celebration of the success was pretty hypocritical. But what did feel like enough was the few times where the success was built on relationships that were honest, where people were vulnerable and direct with each other. The handful of relationships underneath the hype where the individuals that really drove the big exit or the double-digit growth in revenue actually maintained their integrity and leaned into each other for real. The people who told me the truth when it cost them something to do it, and the people who could reflect on their own limits, their own challenges, take accountability for themselves and move through those challenges, yes, sometimes clumsily because we're all human, but sometimes they did it with extraordinary grace. The important thing, though, is that they moved forward. These were the people I built businesses with, alongside, not just for. The rooms where the work stopped being transactional, which we pretty much expect in the business world for sure, but where the work started to really be human. And that included all the good times and the not so good times, because when there is genuine human connection, challenges and triumphs go hand in hand with success. And that's the thread running through everything I've ever built. And it's the thread running through WEGroup Global and now this podcast. So here's the part, though, that should worry you a little. And I've got to tell you, it worries me a lot at the moment, that human connection is not getting easier in this world. It's actually getting harder. We're more reachable than ever, than any generation on the planet before us, and somehow more alone. We can message hundreds of people before breakfast. Just think about what you do with your phone whilst you're having your first coffee or tea in the morning, and you can message dozens, hundreds of people at the start of your day, and not one of those messages has cost you anything real. Leadership's been reduced, if you think about it, to a highlight reel or a LinkedIn post about the award you accepted on stage the night before. Success has actually now become a framework that you can buy. And underneath all of it, the actual skill, the ability to sit with another human being and build something true with them, alongside them, is quietly fading. And that's not a cultural side note, by the way, I don't think. Connection's the whole game, if you think about it, because a business is just people organised. A team is just structured trust. A life well lived is just the people you allow in it and how honestly you show up for them. So if we lose the muscle for real connection, we don't just lose warmth, we lose the actual foundation that everything else is built on. So that's the urgency behind this podcast. Mastering human connection matters more today than it ever has, and precisely because the world is making it harder, not easier for all of us. So let me tell you now what Full Tilt is not, because I think it's just as important as what it is. So the podcast is not something that's going to hand you a 10-step framework and call it a transformation. We've see enough of those advertised on LinkedIn. It's not a coaching session from someone who has the coaching title on their profile or on their podcast, but when you dig a little deeply, they've never run a successful or real business. It's not hustle culture either, just with better lighting. And it's not a highlight reel of how to do a funding round or what an exit looks like, all packaged and dressed up as some sort of unique business wisdom. And trust me, I've sat through enough of those conversations to know how superficial and hollow they can be. Yeah, they're polished and the people are quotable and, when you get down to it though, mostly completely useless information the minute the camera stops rolling. And anyone that knows me knows for sure that I'm just not interested in the polished, superficial version of anyone's story. It's not interesting. I'm more interested in what it actually cost them, what they were actually afraid of, and what was true underneath the version of themselves that they usually tell other people. What they think was the core component within them that helped them win. That's what's valuable to the rest of us when you really think about it. So you're probably thinking, if I already believe all this stuff, why build a podcast around other people's stories instead? Why not just say it myself every week, alone on a podcast, kind of like I'm doing today? Well, to be honest, I don't think any one person has this figured out. I think the only way you actually learn how to build real connection in business, in leadership, in life, is to sit with people who've done it and done it well and ask them honestly how they did it, and then let them answer honestly with their unique perspective. Now, not always because their stories are extraordinary either, although many of them are. but because they're human. And somewhere inside every guest who sits across from me on a podcast every week, there's something true that you can use in your own story. That's the whole premise. We're here to learn from people who have gone before us and achieved something worthwhile. Not to worship them, not to copy them either, but to take what's real in what they've lived, the good, the bad, the pretty, the not so pretty, and hopefully let what they've achieved and how they've done it sharpen what we're building for ourselves. Now, the belief that I've just explained is also the reason WEGroup Global exists. The WEGroup team design and deliver curated retreats and in-person experiences, which you'll see on our website for leaders and organisations. And we do that because I believe exactly what this whole podcast is built on, that the most powerful thing you can do for your people, your culture and your business is bring people together in person with intention, not another video call, and please, not another all hands on with PowerPoint deck situation, which we see far too often, but actually rooms, dedicated time, real people present with each other. And if you think about it, Full Tilt and WeGroup are founded in the same belief, expressed just in two different ways. One is a conversation and the other is a curated room. Both exist because I think we've drifted as a culture away from the thing that actually works. And I want to bring people back to it. So when you hear the name of this podcast, Full Tilt, I don't want you to think about the hustle or the speed of decision making and deadlines just for the sake of highlighting they're necessary as part of every business environment, or that I'm going to talk about why success depends on the people leading the business running themselves into the ground, or that somehow my team or me as an individual are going to deliver to you every week the best business strategy you've ever seen. I'll just call out straight away, we're not going to do any of those things because that's not what this podcast means to me. Full tilt means giving something. Actually, giving everything you actually have. Not the polished, curated version of yourself you want to try and believe, but the real one, the honest one, the raw one. That means showing up all the way. In your work, in your relationships, even to yourself. Instead of holding something back to protect yourself, where you end up living in your own story in your head, rather than leaning in to those you care about, and that in most cases you spend the most time with. Every guest on this show has done that at some point in their own way, and that's what I'm actually asking of them every week. And to be honest, that's what I ask of myself every day, especially when I'm sitting here interviewing someone with the hope that by telling our stories, it helps you. Human connection is the foundation of every successful business and every life well lived. That's why this podcast exists. I'm Belinda Bradford, and I'd like to thank you for listening. And hopefully, the explanation today gives you some of the essence behind not only the podcast, but the being of WeGroup Global. And before you go, though, can you just have a quick look at the link below, hit the subscribe button, and or go to our website, which is wegroupglobal.com, and sign up to our email, and that'll keep you informed on not only what we're doing broadly around the world, but it will also highlight what guests are coming up each week on the podcast. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to catching up with you next week. Ciao.